This is the second part of the pilot qualification task. In this video we are going to cover the PPL privileges and limitations and documents required to exercise those privileges. Let's start. So let's start with the privileges and limitations. The privileges and limitations can be found in Regulation 61113. Let's go there. Now, right at the beginning, the regulation tells us that as private pilot, you are not allowed to carry passengers or property for compensation or hire. What it means is that as a private pilot, you are not allowed to earn from the action of flying. It is important to understand that the FAA considers compensation as anything that could be given in return to the flight you are conducting, and not necessarily a direct payment with money. So for example, your friend wants you to fly him and is willing to pay all the flight expenses. The FAA would say that you are not allowed to do so because by not paying your part, you are actually getting compensation. So, are you really not allowed to share the flight expenses with that friend? That's not exactly the case. In paragraph C to that regulation, the FAA defines another limitation. A private pilot may not pay less than the pro rata share of the operating expenses, which include oil, fuel, airport expenditures, or rental fees. What this regulation means is that if you decide to fly with that friend, you may split the expenses in a manner that you as a pilot should pay at least what that friend is paying. Otherwise, it will be considered as a compensation which you are not allowed to get. It is important to know that insurance or maintenance costs are not shareable expenses. And if you want to know more about what expenses can be shared, I suggest reading the Advisory Circular AC 61.142 that deals exactly with that subject. I'll put a direct link to that Advisory Circular in the description below. In paragraph B, the regulation tells us that private pilot may act as pilot in command of an aircraft in connection with any business or employment if the flight is incidental for this business or the flight is not for compensation or hire. Now, the term incidental might be a little bit vague and could be open to interpretation. What might best explain the term is that the flight in connection with the business is not in the purpose of flying, and it just happens to be the most appropriate manner of transportation on a specific occasion. There's an interesting article called Interpreting the Rules of Business Flying, which I put in the description below. This article provides real good life examples on how the FAA interprets this rule and what it may consider as an incidental flight or not. So I really recommend you to read it. If you're not sure if a flight you are intending to do falls under the definition of incidental flight, you may contact the local FISDO and ask them for an answer, providing your scenario. Paragraph D. A private pilot may act as pilot in command in a charitable, non-profit, or community event. Those are mainly fundraising events where you are not getting paid for flying. More information about operation in those kinds of events can be found on Regulation 91.146. Paragraph E. A private pilot may be reimbursed for aircraft operation expenses that are directly related to search and location activities, provided those operations are approved by a local, state, or federal agency. Paragraph F. If you are an aircraft salesman and you have more than 200 flight hours, you may conduct a demonstration flight to prospective buyers. A private pilot may act as pilot in command of an airplane towing gliders, providing they meet all flight proficiency requirements of Regulation 61.69. A private pilot also may act as pilot in command for the purpose of conducting production flight tests in light sport aircraft intended for certification. and a private pilot may fly without a medical certificate under the basic med privileges and limitations, which are going to be discussed in the next video. In order to exercise the privileges we just talked about, you must have in your physical possession or readily accessible the following documents. A private pilot should have his private pilot certificate and a government-approved photo ID such as driver license, government passport, or identification card, and a valid medical certificate, which we're going to talk about in the next video.